Hello and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me on Career Trek with Akhil. Um, to start with, I'll give a very brief about um, what is Career Trek. Career Trek is a passion project of mine. Um, I basically am a career coach. I've been doing coaching for more than a decade. I'm a certified PCC coach, and currently I'm on a passion project called 100 Days Career Trek, where I'm intending it as a self-help talent management tool for we are fortunate if we have mentors, coaches, but this I'm attempting as being a virtual coach, right? And with me, of course, I know to whom all of you are waiting for. With me, I have Akhil Saxena, and let me add him in right away. Hi, Akhil.
Hi, Ram. Good morning. Hello, good morning, everyone. And a happy
Great.
Daughter's Day to all of you.
Oh yeah. Wonderful. A lot of doting fathers out there. Happy Daughter's Day to all of you. Um, while great to see many of you live. So if you can just put in your comments where are you logging in from, and just a bit of intro about you and where are you logging in from, and if you have a message for either me or Akhil. Okay. And well, so let me do a bit of intro about Akhil, and the reason why I met Akhil at a of course I've been connected with Akhil on LinkedIn, and I met him at one of the coaching industry forums. Obviously, many of us are inspired by his career trajectory, and my intent is that this inspiration can be duplicated, and I'm sure there's a lot of learning that we can take from Akhil, implement it in our careers, and benefit from that. And that's the intent of getting Akhil on board. Thanks a ton, Nikhil, for Akhil for accepting and offering your time.
Thank you, Ram. It is an honor and a pleasure, and I look forward to the conversation ahead of us.
Absolutely. So typically, when I introduce a guest, I usually do it very impromptu. But considering Akhil's stature and the intent of our discussion, I am going to read out his career journey in brief, and that will segue into our conversation. So Akhil is currently the Vice President of Customer Fulfillment Operations for APAC, MENA, LATAM, and Worldwide Customer Service. He joined Amazon in 2013 as Director of Operations and was responsible for fulfillment operations. And he was tasked with developing fulfillment strategy, building a network which came to 60 fulfillment centers, and and his career, he took on different roles and different responsibilities got added to him. Logistics got added, operations of Japan got added later, and in 2020 it went beyond APAC to lead the fulfillment delivery for Latin and MENA geographies. And as latest as June 2022, he took up additional responsibilities of worldwide customer service. I think it's a great trajectory to have profiles, to have your portfolio become larger and larger. And I'm sure there are there's a lot of wisdom, best practices, learning that can be unlocked from this journey, and that's precisely what our conversation is going to be. Prior to Amazon, he's been for Akhil worked with RPG for 3 years and more than a decade with Unilever. And of course, another thing that really resonates with Akhil and me is that he's currently a practicing coach. So, Akhil, that's a trajectory that anyone would love to have, and that journey is fantastic to see and get inspired by. So uh, thank you so much for your time once again. And
Thank you, Ram.
to start with, um, quick probably a quick starter comment on how do you see your career progress so far?
It's a great starting point, Ram. I think I'll talk about my career in two or three phases, maybe three phases, I would say. I've spent about 32 years in the industry after I passed out from college. I'm a mechanical engineer. And then I did only three companies in my 32 years. So my career might not be very similar to what people might have today. But my career has been basically three different companies, and I'll talk about each one of them in a manner that helps people to understand how I made switches in my career.
Sure.
So I think the first big one for me when I came out from college, I was a mechanical engineer and I went into Unilever. I started as a maintenance engineer. I did that role for about three and a half years. And then I realized that, look, while I loved engineering and I still love it today, I love maintenance and how do you build machines, maintain machines, run machines. I think a part of me was very keen to get into the mainstream of manufacturing operations, which is production technology. At that point of time, Unilever did not have a lot of mechanical engineers as production managers. And I think because I was so excited by what I saw and I continued to learn, I kept going to my manager and saying, I want to become a production manager. I want to become a production manager. And I was in one of the largest factories of Unilever, which was Bombay factory. That was my first stint after my traineeship. I continued to go and talk to him and express my aspirations very clearly, very honestly, saying, this is what I'd like to do. And at one point of time, he said, Akhil, there is a very small factory in Nepal, and it's a factory that needs to improve its performance. And right now, we think you could be one person if you want to go there. But it's very small, very far off, and it's not mainstream for us at this point of time. So I was like, okay. And I just got married a couple of months before that. So I didn't even discuss this completely with my wife, but I said, here's my opportunity. It's very far away. It's a very small factory. I don't even know what I will do there. Will I succeed or not? But I think I decided to step into the unknown. It was unknown for me because that factory's product range was different from what I was handling. And I was not into manufacturing. I was in a soap factory which was making soap. And therefore, my job was to ensure that the machines which packed the soap and did the packaging worked well. So I was a maintenance engineer in a soap factory. But here was an opportunity to go and become a production manager of a tiny factory in Nepal outside of the comfort zone. And I took that chance. I took it a chance because one thing that my boss said was, the factory is not doing very well, but you can't mess it up any further. And I think in that one line that he said gave me a lot of sense to say he trusts me and he believes in what I could do, and therefore he saw my potential in some form or shape. And that's one of the reasons why I made that big career change to move from Unilever from India into Nepal.
And very very interesting you say that, because a lot of queries that I get during my coaching sessions is, I am right now in a role A, and I want to move to a role B, but I keep getting more opportunities for A. So how do I make this switch? That's a question that keeps coming time and again. And I think what you did with your manager, being persistent, being very intentional, saying, I'm clear about what I want and how you went about it. So is there anything specific that you want to highlight about that?
I think we all own our careers, and I think this is a point you will hear me speak many times. We all own our own careers. We think others own our careers, but I would say we own our own careers, and therefore we have to be honest and upfront about what we'd like to do. And there are times when we might not be sure about what we want to do, but that's the place where mentors come in, allies come in, sponsors come in. But we own our careers, and I think that's one piece that I would like everyone on the call to really think about, to say, are you owning your real career? Are you really owning the career? And being intentional about it, being honest and speaking about what you like to do, and then taking the chance when it comes up, being bold. And when I say being bold, you embrace uncertainty. And I'll talk about other parts of the stints that I've done. But you learn to become comfortable with the unknown. And I think that's a skill and a competency both. And I think I would like the people on the call to really think about that part. How do you embrace uncertainty? That's always going to be around us.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much, Akhil. I usually refer to that as taking bet on yourself. We usually look for managers or someone up there to take a bet on ourselves and say, hey, I think you're ready for this, take it up. I think before that, we need to be intentional, take a bet on ourselves, and then you know tell as many people as who can help us, let them know about our intention, ambition, and the path will show up on itself. So great learning for us from there. So what next? So from Nepal, how was Nepal for you, and when was the next crucible moment?
I think Nepal was a brilliant learning opportunity for me. I learned a lot. And one of the things I learned was a skill, I would say, or a competency that helped me change my career trajectory in many ways. And I think that was about people. I think Nepal taught me about people skills, people leadership, working with people, and I think that has stood me in good stead. It also allowed me to understand what you could do with a small group of people if you are able to inspire folks and if you're able to have a very consistent shared vision. So I did that in Nepal, and then I moved back to India. I ran factories in India, ran factories in multiple parts of India. And at one point of time, which is where I made the second pivotal move, was to say I was a factory manager of one factory in Goa, which was manufacturing soap, and we had an oil plant as well, fatty acid plant. But then I felt that, look, I've done this, I've run factories, and I'm comfortable in one building. How do I now find other business lines which I don't have the exposure to? So I decided I will try and find a role which gives me exposure to different lines of business. And that's how I decided that I'd like to do a role which allows me breadth. Might not be as much depth as what a typical factory manager would have, but breadth and managing across business lines. And that's how I made a shift within Unilever to go to a role which was running a cluster of factories in Silvassa. So those factories were doing tea, they were doing different kinds of products like color cosmetics, hair oil, shampoos, lotions, which things that I had not done before. And I thought, one, I learned different parts of the business. Also, secondly, I learned a lot about managing distributed operations, and therefore different set of skill sets were required to do that. So you are now not managing by line of sight, but you are managing beyond your line of sight. In a factory, you go to the factory every day, and every day you are seeing what's happening. Whereas in this distributed operation, you are now doing things very differently. So I thought that was a great learning moment because it allowed me breadth of exposure, and I built a lot of people in terms of building strong teams. And that's where the people leadership came into support here. And then after that, it was very interesting because after about 19 years with Unilever, I
So
decided that I was getting very comfortable. And
if I
that's where I
can
made a second shift. Go ahead, Ram. Go ahead.
if I can interrupt you there, sorry for butting in. You mentioned saying after a couple of years or so you felt comfortable, and then you wanted to expand your horizon. So a lot of people have this question in terms of is there a right timing to it? So when do I decide saying, okay, I've done this role enough and I need to expand myself, or so what are the signals that you look for, and when is it right to say that, okay, I have become comfortable now and I want to embrace more challenge?
I think personally, I'll speak for this for myself. People might have different views about it. But my personal thing is if my learning curve is flattening out, if I'm not learning, this is one signal that I look for. And the second signal I look for is the impact and the contribution I'm making to the business and to the people I'm working around. If both of those curves are beginning to flatten out, then that's a time to introspect to say, should I be looking for a different role within the same organization, or to say, is there something that you'd like to do differently outside of this organization, which allows you to build skill or competencies in areas that lead to your long-term path? That's actually how I made my shift outside of Unilever, and I can talk about it whenever you finish with the question, Ram.
Sure. And the next point that comes up is, you spoke about width versus depth. Like I said, you chose to take up a role where you'll have probably additional responsibilities in terms of the width, may not necessarily have line of sight. So there comes the dichotomy of, should I specialize, should I generalize? So how does one deal with that dilemma of generalization vis-a-vis specialization?
Yeah, that's actually very interesting because in today's world, I think it's uh, a world where there is a mix of both. But we should also be conscious to say what's the future trajectory. Generalist roles are slowly getting automated in many ways. Technology is coming into the fore where you could do things which are more manual, more repetitive in process, and therefore the world for the future has to be a world which has got the right balance between being a generalist and being a specialist. You have to find the right balance between those. I think in your early part of your career, most of the people would tend to focus on one part of the world, one part of their work, which is allowing them to specialize. Like my specialization, for example, for the first 3 years was maintenance, and therefore preventive maintenance, condition-based maintenance, different strategies on maintenance. But as I moved ahead in my career, I felt that look, being that specialist in the maintenance function or just a function which was manufacturing was not good enough, and that's where I started to look at it. So I would say early in your career, you would be focusing a lot in specialized areas, but as you grow in your career journey, you are starting to look at a little bit more general. But the world is looking at areas where automation comes in, and therefore repetitive work is going to go away.
Right. So I'll just pick one question from Ajit here. Not sure to what depth we can get into it, but just a couple of inputs. You spoke about embracing uncertainty and embracing ambiguity, getting out of comfort zone. So, any specific tip on how to do that, or what
Yeah,
mindset someone should have for it?
brilliant question. Thank you, Ajit, for asking that. I think the two things I would say. One is having the confidence in yourself, saying, "I don't know how to do it, but I'll figure it out by leveraging people around me." Right? None of us are an expert on everything, and therefore that confidence to say it's unknown, but let me embrace this first. I don't know when I embrace this, what am I going to feel? Is it going to be wet and hard and spiky and thorny? I just don't know. And COVID taught us that to say we don't know what next day would look like when we had this whole thing about COVID. Therefore, I would really think about this whole mental model saying, one, I have a network of people that I can bounce off my ideas or my fears or my concerns and being authentic about it. None of us is an expert. Therefore, you are also vulnerable when you tell others that I don't know how to do this. Do you have an idea? Do you have a suggestion for me? Have you handled something like this? And that allows you to become, as a person, be vulnerable, but at the same time being authentic, and that brings in trust, and that's where people are willing to share very openly with you. And those support systems, that network of people who could be allies or mentors or coaches or sponsors, that allows you to say, look, I have some people that I can fall upon for advice or suggestion, and therefore you build more confidence in yourself. So I would say self-confidence and leveraging the network of people that you have. We won't have all the answers all the times, but once you know that, look, I can find out, I can connect with people, um, and I can connect with people who might be able to help me or who might be able to give me new insights about how to build something. I think that has helped me a lot in my future, in my past.
Wonderful. So having that, as in seeking help, looking at seeking help as a strength and not as a weakness, and being open. Uh, Not really. We don't know the future, so it's not about confidence. It's the confidence that you can figure it out. I think that's a great
Yeah,
insight.
yeah.
Talking
It's your
about
own self confidence. It's your own self confidence saying, I will make it happen, right? And then you'll figure out the path. Your conviction is there, your intent is there, and then you figure out the how of to do it.
yeah, yeah. I think many times they say that you take the step and the solutions will come to you. Kind.
Exactly, exactly.
So you spoke about this support system in terms of mentors. Coaches is more a recent thing, but having a mentor, sounding board, etc. Um, Curious about who was your first mentor, and how did you go about reaching out to mentors? Or I'm sure your mentors would have changed over a period of time. So how do you go about choosing a mentor and maintaining that relationship with the mentor?
Yeah. Um, my first mentor was a finance manager when I was a trainee, and he mentored me on financial planning for career. It's very unique, right? It's not about related to work. But he saw me, and I was a trainee. I was in Chindwara. I was in a factory. There was not much to do in the end of the day. We would go and watch movies and stuff like that. And he said, "But how are you planning your finances?" I said, "Look, I just started earning." And he said, "Yeah, this is the best time to start planning your finances." And as a mentor, he actually said, "Do you have a PPF account?" And I said, "What is that?" From that, I started off from that perspective to say, I don't know what a PPF account is. He sat down with me, explained to me tax, explained to me PPF account. Went to my factory manager and said, "Look, I'm taking this boy. He doesn't know what PPF is. I'm taking this boy. I'm going to go to the State Bank of India, open an account with him. We'll both be back in an hour's time." Now, that is an example of where somebody reached out and said, "Look, you don't know this and you should be learning this." And therefore, Mr. Desai was a mentor for me. But that was my first mentor, to answer your question. After that, I've had mentors in different parts, and there are times when I have chosen mentorship saying, "I don't know how to do this, or I'm not great at this skill, and let me find people who can help me around here." There have been times when I have also not leveraged the mentorship relationship completely because I felt that, oh, the mentor should be telling me, whereas the ownership in a mentor relationship is with the mentee to see that they take time from their mentors and they get back on action that they mutually agree upon. And that's how it's a symbiotic relationship. A mentor will not exist without a mentee, and a mentee does not excel without a mentor. So it's a relationship which is very symbiotic. It goes together. It's a hand-in-hand relationship. And you go and reach out for mentors. I know there are people on this call who have reached out to me. I do mentor some of them. Mary's on the call, and she wrote that I was a mentor to her. I still mentor her. So there are people, and therefore people reach out and say, "Can we talk? Can we discuss it? Can we talk about things that might be challenges for them?" Or I could share my experiences and things where they might want different point of view. So I would encourage people to reach out and build mentors, find that network of people who could help you. And at some point in time, you might realize that mentors become sponsors. And I'll take a minute to explain the concept between mentorship and sponsorship so people realize that. A mentor is a person who sits with you and talks about your work. So you could reach out to a person, and then I just asked whether we should wait for a mentor. You should reach out. In my mind, you should reach out and say, "I need support on ABC," because you know best about what's not working for you, what areas you're not comfortable about. So I would say don't wait for a mentor, reach out for a mentor. But a mentor speaks with you in front of you. At some point of time in our careers, because these mentors know you well, you build trust with them, they understand what progress you have made on your performance and potential. Some of these mentors become sponsors, and a sponsor is a person who speaks for you for in front of other people. So you are not in that room. But this sponsor is speaking for you because they might know you better, they might know your potential better. And therefore, mostly I've seen mentors becoming sponsors. And a sponsor puts their professional capabilities on the line for you. And therefore, I would really encourage you to build that mentorship relationship. I mean, it's not necessary that you should have only one mentor. Build as many as you can, as many as you can nurture the relationships. Because at some point of time, some of the people who have mentored you in your career are likely to be the sponsors who will speak for you when you are not in that room. And that's where more doors, more opportunities uh, pick up. I think Manish had a question about should mentors choose their mentees. That's in my view, that's not really right because a mentee can reach out. And in Amazon, for example, where I work today, we have an open mentoring platform where I made myself available to people who want to be mentored. And people come in from different business lines. They come in for different kinds of issues. Some women have come in to say, "How do I project my work without being seen as aggressive?" Some men have come to me and said, "I want to showcase my work, but I am not able to understand what's the right way without bringing other people." Somebody has come back and say, "Hey, how do I build this skill so that I can move from operations to program management or to something else?" So I think mentorship is a great gift. I would certainly encourage all of you to find the mentors and many mentors, and at some point of time, some of them can be sponsors for you in your life.
I think that's a great insight on how a mentor can I think the ownership of engagement with the mentor is with the mentee. Like we say, you should own your career. I think goes without saying, even for the mentor-mentee relationship. And I like the distinction between a mentor and a sponsor, and how a mentor evolves to become a sponsor, and that opens up a lot of, because there are a lot of times that I think a common mistake that many people tend to make is, reach out to your mentor and say, help me get a job, help me open a door for me, please. That's It's cold calling, and it doesn't really work that way. And if you have established that trust with the mentor, and that happens more organically and not in a very prescriptive, intentional way.
Right.
So I see a couple of questions around work-life balance, harmony. I see Manjunath asking about it. I see Hashim asking about it, saying, in such a senior role, the workload, stress levels, multitasking are high, and how do you find work-life harmony?
It's an interesting one. My work requires me to work across different time zones. And I think what I do is to ensure that I'm honest about what are the times which are available for me, where I can engage with people across different time zones. And I've also carved out time which is very sacrosanct for me. So people from Amazon would know that it's very hard to have anything with Akhil between 1 and 2 unless there's a crisis. It's my time, whether I go and eat lunch, whether I go and read my newspaper, whether I go and do my Sudoku or Wordle or quizzes. It's my time. So we have to be very disciplined. At least that's the way it has worked for me to say, be disciplined about the times that you keep for yourself. There, like with the team in India, I would not have any meeting after 6 p.m. unless there's a crisis. At the same time, because you enjoy work, sometimes you realize that, look, it's not really work because it's just what you're enjoying and you're doing that part of it. But we set rules for yourself is what I have figured out for myself. Like weekends are usually for mentoring, and I spent many of my weekends mentoring people. This is one of the things that to say, look, I could go back to the community, and therefore either whether I do volunteering or whether I'm here on LinkedIn or mentoring people offline is something that I'm passionate about, and I'll find the time for us. So the messaging I would have is we all have 24 hours and we all have many things to do. Find what is most important for you personally and professionally. Put those two big rocks, the things related to those, inside your calendars and schedules first. The rest of the things you will be able to fill up beyond. But focus on the big rocks, put them onto your schedules and do that well.
Great. I think the message I'm taking away is, being very clear about your priorities. If you look at the wheel of life, the different roles that we play, uh, choosing what to focus on and then having a discipline around it. So I think that really helps. So going back to your journey, so at Unilever, you chose a role which is more multifaceted,
Yeah.
and then you made your next big move. And can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So within Unilever in the 18, 19 years when I worked there, I realized that my North Star, what I wanted to do in my career was to become a supply chain professional, a supply chain expert. And that excited me because a lot of my time was spent on the shop floor, and that excites me. I'm engaging with people, helping them grow, helping them find their own potential. And I said, look, I want to be a supply chain expert. So within Unilever, I had exposure to planning and I had exposure to manufacturing. I spent a lot of time in those two aspects of our supply chain. But procurement and logistics slash transportation, those two areas, I did not have a lot of exposure. And
Mm.
that's a place where I reflected to say, if I have to be a supply chain expert, which is my North Star, which is the direction that I want to head to, I have two critical skills which are missing, which is procurement and logistics and transportation. And therefore, you can't
Mm.
become an expert in logistics unless you pick up these two skills. So the next role I chose was a role which gave me a couple of things. One, it pulled me out of my comfort zone. 19 years in Unilever, in a multinational company, very structured environment, very SOP driven, into my next role with KC at RPG Enterprises, which was a promoter run business with professional board, but a promoter run business, a very different sector, away from FMCG into a sector which is into infrastructure and EPC, and gave
Mm.
me end-to-end exposure to a supply chain. It was a much smaller company than Unilever, and a lot of people asked me why I'm doing it, and I said to myself, like, this is the right thing for me. I believe that this skill set that I'm missing in this role, which is end-to-end supply chain, I will be able to learn in an environment which allows me to leverage on my strengths, but also find time to build on what I don't know. And my 3.5 years at KEC International, which is RPG group company, allowed me to really learn about logistics, at least some part of logistics. I learned international logistics for sure. And then also procurement skills. How do you negotiate? How do you buy? And so on. And those skills came in handy in 2013 when Amazon was coming into the country and they wanted somebody who had logistics skills. 3.5 years ago, I didn't know logistics, right? And therefore, when you're purposeful, in my second role that I took outside of Unilever with RPG, I was purposeful to say, I need to build this muscle and this skill, which I don't have. Um, and I think that role allowed me to make the transition.
Wonderful. Thank you. So it's like serendipity when um, you ventured into logistics, and then Amazon happened. But it's not a stroke of luck. It's you prepared yourself for that luck to happen and strike. Um, so you spoke about a couple of things when from Unilever to RPG. So if I draw a parallel, it's like big fish in small pond vis-a-vis small fish in a big pond, and moving from a very established process-driven entity to a owner-driven, semi-structured, more unstructured kind of a setup. Um, so if someone is at the juncture of sort of deciding on this, what would your input be for that person?
I would say if you are clear about what you want to do, then you should certainly evaluate the skill sets that are required to get there. And if you don't have those skill sets, then find a role or a job that allows you to build that skill. Uh, as a mental model, the way I imagine it is you are in a room which has got, let's say, four corners. You are standing in the middle of the room, and the room is full of deep water, and you don't know how to swim, but you are standing in the middle on a rock. In your hands, you have a couple of floating rocks that you can throw in life. Each of those floating rocks is a job that you will do. Now, if you're clear about which corner you want to go, saying, I want to be an entrepreneur, or I want to be a businessman, or I want to be a supply chain expert, or I want to be a marketing expert, or I want to do something, you have labeled the corners in that room and you now want to walk towards one of those corners. Then you have to be purposeful
Wonderful.
because when you throw the stone in the water, which will float, the stone will float, it's a roll. It will help you to take to the corner. So it will never land in a straight line. So you might not get the most ideal job. It might not be what you want to say, hi, why Akhil are you moving from a large Unilever job to a smaller company? But it was the right stone for me to throw in the corner of supply chain expertise. And that's what I would encourage people to say. If you are sure about where you want to go, what do you want to do in your next 20, 30 years of your life, then start putting the rolls, throwing the stones, the floating stones in the direction where you want to head to. And that might mean that you might take smaller roles, niche roles, roles outside of your comfort zone, but it helps you to build a skill that will be taking you successful for the end destination.
Wonderful. I think that's a beautiful metaphor. Um, Great for visualization. You're you're at the center. You have multiple paths that you can take, and you're technically looking at the stones or the tools that you have as the means for you to get to where you want to get to. Yeah. So how do you go about doing this when you sort of make your development plan for yourself, saying I want to be there, I want to get there. How do you make this plan, and are there some routines that you set for yourself? Is there a periodicity to this in terms of when you'll relook at, and how do you review? How do you go about that?
Yeah, for me, I think personally, I think there are two parts, timings in my year, right? That one is at the end of the year. At the end of the year, you finish the year. It's time for reflection to say what worked well for you, what did not work well with you. That's also a time when you start getting into performance, the period of performance management and understanding feedback that you have got through the year and so on. That's a good time to reflect to say, what have you learned about yourself? What have you learned about your work? What have you learned about the impact you are creating? And if you're not creating that impact, then maybe it's a time because one of your contribution curves is then flattening off. And the second time is somewhere in the middle of the year, around June, July, when half the year is gone. You have reviewed your mid-year results, KRAs, goals, and you are saying, I'm behind something, or I've done this 6 months, but I don't know if I'm doing it well. So I would encourage all of you to at least do it once a year to have that moment and time for self reflection about what are your strengths, what is it that you want to leverage that strength for, which direction do you want to move towards, are you making progress towards that direction, are you adding value to yourself, are you adding value to the organization and to the community outside of you, and more importantly, what next would you like to do in this journey towards improving yourself, your community, and your organization. So I
Wonderful.
normally do it twice a year, maybe.
One of the advice I got from my mentors is, usually you see organizations doing offsites just at the beginning of the year, etc. So one of the questions that my mentor asked me was, when was the last time that you went on an offsite for your career planning? And it struck me that I never looked at it that way.
Correct.
But yeah, it's a great pit stop to reorient and reevaluate, etc. So moving on, you got your break in Amazon with the logistics, etc. So how did that start? And you started spreading your wings even in Amazon. So what's the secret of your flight?
I mean, there's no secret. I'll share with you what I thought worked for me. It might work for many of you. It might be other things that work for you. But within Amazon, when I started, my role was basically to manage the fulfillment centers or the warehouses that we ship our customer orders from. At that point of time, when I joined only about 3 weeks after Amazon joined. So I left my previous job before Amazon had even launched in the country.
Hmm.
Um, and that again is another example of that leap of faith saying, I know if this goes bad, I have enough credibility and trust with other people that I can find a job if this doesn't work well. But I resigned even before Amazon had launched in the country with the hope that it will launch at some point of time. But I had resigned in March and then I joined in July, actually, 4 months after I resigned. So that was a
Is
leap
that
of faith.
a bet? Is that a yeah, a leap of faith? Is that a bet in itself?
It's a bet in itself. And what allowed me to take that bet was, as I said, like the confidence in yourself and your relationship and the network that you have built over years to say, if this bet goes bad and I fall, there are people who will help me to stand up and I can dust my pant and start walking again, start running again. Right. So I would love to encourage all of you to build that network. And that network was very helpful for me. I mean, I spoke to a lot of people before I made the move. It's not that I just woke up one day and said, let me make this leap of faith. I spoke to a lot of people. They helped me understand the pros and cons. They asked me questions that made me reflect about it. But because I was intentional about saying, hey, here is an opportunity, it's here is the risk, here is the benefit. I had good advice from people that I could leverage onto that. So I came into Amazon, built the warehousing network for the first 3 years, and then I picked up the second part, which is the transportation part of it. So my first role was only warehousing, but then transportation came into the picture. I did that till about 2018 and 2019, and
How
that's
did
where
how did that
I'm
how
sorry.
did that how did that happen? As in, you were managing warehouses, and then transportation got added. Sounds like a very logical progression. But a lot of people tend to get stuck in those roles and find it difficult to really expand themselves. So, what do
Hmm.
you think one should do or not do to be able to prosper the way one intends to?
Yeah, great question, ma'am. I should have answered that. So when I was building the warehousing network, I was also building a lot of leaders who could take a lot off my plate as I started building the network. So I think investing time in building a strong team was something that helped me. And the second piece was getting into the adjacent space of where from the warehousing part. So if the shipment is getting dispatched from the warehouse, where does it go? It goes into the transportation network. So you start talking to the transportation team as to what I could do to improve their lives, what my teams could do to support them. Then I think because you are now operating on the envelope of your role, you now have exposure to what lies outside of your role. And one of the things I've realized in my career is don't draw boundaries around your role. These are all boundaries that we build ourselves. Say my role is only warehousing, or my role is only transportation, or my role is only ABC. When you don't have those boundaries and you are saying, look, I'm here, my key role is to build a network of warehouses. But as I do that, I have an opportunity to build talent in the organization. I have an opportunity to build successes for myself. I have also an opportunity to learn more about my adjacent space on logistics. And that's how I would say over the 3 years I built rapport with the team. I also learned a lot of lessons the hard way. I would also tell you this story. You should know this. My first big event in 2016 was in transportation when I took over, was the sale peak that we had, and it was a disaster. It was a disaster.
Oh.
It was a disaster. Um,
Mhm.
I don't think I did it well. I think I did not put in the right guardrails. I did not inspect a lot of things that should have been inspected. So a leap of faith that I had taken, it was an expanded role, so I continued to do warehousing, but my logistics foray or my exposure in that expanded role was a disaster. But what I had learned in that period was to say that, look, as long as you're focused on the learning, as long as you can identify what goes bad, what went bad, and you can go and fix it, and you have lessons that you have learned in the process, most organizations allow that safety net of saying a failure is not the end of your career. I've made enough and more failures in my life, and I'm still here at Amazon after 9 years. So I would certainly give this piece at least a lesson that I learned, saying, look, even if you fail, there are people who can help you to stand up and say, okay, you learned something. What did you learn? How will you use that? And move on, continue. It's also one of the reasons why I continue to invent and do a lot of innovation in India, which in the logistics space, which allowed us to scale up very rapidly. And at some point
Well,
of time,
that
what I did with warehousing is what I did with logistics to say I can do more outside of India. So what next for me?
and that was one of the questions. I forget the name of the individual, but the question was, how do you deal with failures? So when the sort of when things didn't go as planned, obviously that dents your confidence, creates a bit of self doubt, and you start questioning whether whether it was worth it in terms of taking that bet, etc. How does one deal with that? It's a small phase before you realize that you can build on it. But how do you deal with that phase of anxiety, self doubt, etc.?
Yeah, I think when this whole thing was going on and I wasn't doing very well, I mean, for me, that failure period was just a 4 week period when we were having our Diwali sale and so on. And for the first 3 days when things were not good, my boss didn't call me up. He was based out of Seattle. He didn't send me a message. He didn't call me. And I was like, why is my boss not asking what's going on, Akhil? What are you doing? Why are you messing it up? This is big time. And no one, there was no. So finally, out of like, I would say self guilt or like I was like, what am I doing? I wrote a WhatsApp message to him saying, this is messy and this is what I'm trying to do, but I feel horrible about this. He just sent me like one liner message. And it was, I'll repeat what he had said at that point of time. He said, my dear friend, you are riding a tiger. Let's talk about it when it's over. So, three things he said in that one liner message. My dear friend says he still owns me. He hasn't disowned this fellow who is messing up a large sale. You are
Mm.
riding a tiger. So he understands. He knows that, look, you have to go through this crucible moment to learn. If you get off the tiger will eat you. You can't jump off the tiger now. So you have to go through this crucible experience of learning the hard way. And then he said, let's speak when it is over, saying, I don't want you to be sending me 15 different bridges about what happened and what's happening and what are you doing. You get it done, learn what has happened, and then we'll talk about it. And we had a long chat about what I could have done differently about it. But those moments are the ones that I would say are the ones which tell you, saying there is somebody who has your back. Most organizations, I would tell you, have somebody who has your back. If you feel you don't, nobody has your back, you're mistaken.
Mm. That's a very powerful anecdote. I think there's a lot to unlock in that about careers and leadership and a lot more. Great. So yeah. So coming towards the last leg of your journey so far, then so you took the extended role of logistics, and of course then the Japan operations came in and worldwide customer service so far. What learnings or what insights do you have from that bit of the journey?
Yeah, again, I think in that piece where I felt that I had been running the Indian network for about 5, 6 years, and I was challenging myself to say, what can I do more? And when I spoke to my managers about I'd love to do something more, I'm not stretching myself. I was acknowledging that I'm not stretching myself. Right? That acknowledgement has to be honest to yourself, saying, "Are you really stretching yourself? Are you delivering to your full potential or not?" If the answer is no, then you should reach out to say, "What more can I do?" And that's where they said, "Okay, maybe would you like to run Japan? Japan is a much larger business than India." And I was like, "Oh, I don't know. This is a country I've never managed. Sitting in India and trying to manage a country much larger than Japan, different culture, different nuances, different complexity. Like India is very large in size. In Japan,
Right.
the north to the south of the country you cover in one day. So your logistics is very different as compared to India. Japan has much more automation. It's an aging population, so they don't have too many people who you can hire and bring into work if just because there's a sales spike. Japan has Amazon Robotics. I'd never run a robotic building, or I didn't have exposure to that kind. So I think there was this whole piece, but some people in the organization felt that I could do it, but I had to stretch, I had to learn, and therefore I took up that additional role of managing India on the side, but managing Japan as well. And in that process, there were learnings. I did some things which were not right in terms of culture, and therefore cultural sensitivity became a big thing in terms of dealing about or managing countries outside of India. And somebody asked me in the chat about like how do you lead outside of India, a large region. I think this whole piece about being very culturally sensitive about how you deal as a leader became very important and a learning for me. But when I was able to do Japan, I did that for about 2.5 years, and then somebody said, "Would you like to do more?" And I said, "Maybe, yeah. Maybe now that I have exposure to do two different countries, I could do more." And that's how I picked up the emerging regions, which is basically in Middle East, Latin America, and Asia Pacific. And that's how I do my role. But as I did that, I made sure of two things. One is, am I building a strong team that can take stuff off my plate? Because if my plate is full, I can't take anything more. So I
Mm.
have to ensure that there is space on my plate to take something more. But to do that, you have to be, in a way, selfish to build a strong team, which needs effort, which needs time, which needs investment of your own time to go and recruit and go and look at CVs and go and identify the right people who you need on your team to deliver what you want to for yourself. So I spent a lot of time. Even now I spend a lot of time in working with talent so that I can build great teams. When you have great teams and strong teams, and you trust them, you are able to give your plate to them, saying, "Would you like to do this?" Because in that process, you're growing them as well to step up
Mm.
into your role at some point of time. And that's how I've personally seen how I could build my future successors. And because your plate has now more space, you can take
Mm.
on more, and you can tell your manager saying, "Hey, would you like me to do this project for you? Would you like me to lead something more?" So I did more projects at a global level, even though I'm based out of India, and that's how some of the projects became more global in nature, and that's how customer service happened after that.
Amazing. That's a great journey. I think building your team, in addition to benefiting the team in itself, benefits you in a much larger way, and I think that catapults you to your next orbit, helps you take more uh, great stuff.
Yeah.
So
And one more thing, Ram, I'll just add here. I would also say that build mechanisms, because when you are leading at scale, when you're managing large scale teams, you need mechanisms to help you to grow. So one is the team. The team is there, but you are not only just leaving everything to the team and just walking away saying, "Okay, I don't know what to do, but I don't care about it." No, that's not the point. Therefore, you build mechanisms of governance to say how at a periodic level you know what the business is doing, what your teams are doing, how are they
mm,
performing, what areas do they need support on, and what's your impact for growing them, right? So building the right mechanisms comes along with building strong teams. I just
absolutely.
wanted to make that point.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm always fascinated. I'm never a fan of a leader who says I'm too busy, which means your team is not strong. That's the message that I get. But if someone has a time off, then it's a great sign that it's in great hands in terms of the teams. So thanks a lot for walking us through your career journey and those and all those crucible moments. But if you were to sum it up and sort of give us 2 3 tips to all the viewers, about 400 of them who have signed up and are viewing the show, what are 3 4 career hacks that you'd like to recommend from your experience?
Yeah, I think one of them I'm going to repeat is own your career. No one owns it other than you. So if you have a network of people, of allies and sponsors and coaches and mentors, and that is your board of trustees, then you are the chairperson of that board of trustees. So own your
Mm.
career. You are the most important person in your career, right? So please own it yourself. The second one I would say is challenge yourself. If you
Mm.
are asking yourself the question of, am I operating at full potential? And the answer is no, I could do more, then two things to do. One, ask yourself, what is your barrier in operating at full potential and working to fix those barriers? And the second one is, okay, if I have the potential and I can do more, then what are the areas that I can do which are adjacent to the space in which I operate? Because the adjacent spaces are the easiest ones to pick up. So if I'm in warehousing, logistics becomes the next adjacent space. But if I'm in warehousing and tomorrow I say, oh, I want to go and do something in private equity space, which is not related to warehousing, it might be harder move to make. Not impossible, but it might be harder move to make. I would
Mm.
say challenge yourself, ask yourself whether you're operating at full potential, and look at areas by which you can impact adjacent spaces. And when you look at adjacent spaces and take roles, I would also say no one is fully ready to take a role. No one, right? Even when you're hiring a new person, you hire them for your strengths, but they will also have development opportunities, right? So no one is ready completely. So don't wait for that. I have to be fully ready before I apply for that role. The
Mm.
statistic says that typically men apply for roles even when they think that the match between their own skill set and what the role needs is 60%. But women sometimes, the research says that they wait for 100% match. No one is fully ready. So don't wait for everything to tie up with the job description or the role description. Go out, reach, challenge yourself in that space. And the third thing I would say is I've been very fortunate to have been surrounded by people who are high caliber people that by being with them or being in the middle of them, my learning curve has accelerated. And because my learning curve has accelerated, it has also helped me to fuel my own career growth. So surrounding yourself with people um, who have a lot to give you, to lot to teach you, would be one more hack that I would have for the folks on the call.
Wonderful. So own your career, uh, challenge yourself, expand, explore adjacencies and expand. Wonderful. Thanks for these insights, Akhil. There's one question which can be a slightly tricky one, but I'll throw it up there. We have Sudhanshu who is asking, how do you deal with corporate politics during this process? So this the word politics has come to has many connotations. Navigating through the organization, uh, not all of it is bad. When you have people, when you have people, there are issues, and that sort of gets labeled as politics. So, how would you want to respond to this?
Yeah. Yeah, as you said, it's a tricky question, but let me give you my thought here. Um, One way I would say is always focus on telling your story and not on selling your story.
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference between the two, right? When you tell your story and say, this is what I do, and when you're talking about career and impact you're making, you're talking about your learnings, your failures, your successes, contributions made, missed opportunities. And in that way, you are saying that I'm not ideal, I'm not perfect, but I am being authentic about what I do, what I did, what I learned, and so on. That's telling your story. But when people want to progress their career, they sometimes focus on selling their story. The selling their story is to package it well, it looks nice, and therefore not talk about some of your learning, not talk about some of your missed opportunities or your big failures, and say it should look good so that the other person can hire me or other person can take me. And because we focus a lot sometimes inadvertently on selling our story versus telling our story, we get caught in this saying, oh, he said that, but he said that, but he did that, but that happened to him, and so on, or her, and so on. And that's where I would say one of the ways that you could navigate through corporate politics is being honest about your story, tell your story. You don't have to sell your story. The other piece is to do your work so brilliantly well that when the flag shines high, people actually walk to the flag saying, who is the person holding that high flag? They come to you versus you jumping up and down and trying to showcase your own stuff. And that's the reason why I say focus on telling the story, not selling. But to package it, you have to tell
Very
out the story properly. That's very important. It's not. that you should not talk about your successes. Of course, that's why I use the word tell the story.
Very interesting distinction between telling your story vis-a-vis selling the story. Fresh from this is a question from my side, Akhil. Fresh from the all the images that we see of Federer and Nadal, holding their hands and bidding farewell to Federer. They have been very fierce competitors on the field, but best of the friends. So I'm sure there were many people who were at a peer level with you, probably wanting to have a similar journey like you. Some of them get a faster track for whatever reasons. So, how do you deal with that competition at peer level? Does that really kill collaboration, dampen? How do you deal with competition at work?
Yeah. So I should tell you this that my second job, which is moving from Unilever to RPG, happened because one of my peers, to whom I had expressed very clear what I want to do, that peer of mine was contacted by a headhunter for the role in RPG.
Hmm.
He realized that he was not the right fit for that role. And he said, "Look, I'm not the right person for this role, but you should certainly talk to Akhil because that's his ambition and that's the thing that he has in mind." And he was the person, and that's why I said the network of sponsors to say, here is a person who could speak on my behalf because I was not in a conversation between that headhunter and my peer. But in that, he spoke about me to say, why don't you speak to him? He could be a better candidate than I am. And therefore, because I have gone through that experience, I feel this whole concept about, oh, just because you are a competitor, just because you are a peer, you have to take each other down. I don't think it works for anyone in the world, whether it's sports or politics or industry. So I have benefited from my peers. I've learned from them. There will always be some people who will be better than you. There will always be some people that you could help them become better. And I think if you keep that being self aware, I think it's been very helpful to me in my career journey. So there are people, there are peers, and somebody's going to get promoted ahead of you, but that shouldn't be something that you will put your head down and say, "Oh God, I didn't get promoted." I mean, we are all human beings and we all have emotions. But if you were to be self-reflective and saying, "What could I do that that person did? What could I learn from that person? What are the strengths of that person? What could I benefit from that?" I think we convert it into something which is more valuable for us, and it is more which grows us in the longer period of time. So I would encourage people to think of it not as competitors, but to say, here are peers that we can learn from. And we all, at some point of time in our lives, we will always have people ahead or behind us, right? So I don't think we should just spend too much time disproportionately about it.
That's a great attitude. I think looking at a peer, it's great to have that experience where a peer became a sponsor. But having that attitude, I think definitely changes the whole paradigm with which you look at how you engage with your peers and stakeholders. So we had opened up a an online survey where we had asked people to put in their questions, and I'll probably pick a couple of them from there, and then we can close it there. One question I'll probably probably club these two questions. One which says, I'm not from a tier one B school, and that's sort of stunting my growth. And the second one is, I am not an MBA, and that's sort of stunting my growth. Uh, is there validity to this perception myth? How far, how untrue? And if so, even if it is there in pockets, how do you deal with it?
I don't know how you picked up these two questions, but I'll tell you, I'm neither an MBA, neither from a premier engineering institute. I came from an REC, and I've not done my MBA, right? So I don't know about the myth part of it, but at least that's data here for you. Um, Also, data now. If I see data, 60% of India's CEOs do not have an MBA. Now, that's data. I am not making it up myself. It is there, right out there. If you
Mhm.
look at people who have, look at Naveen Jindal, for example, he has not done his MBA. He leads Jindal Steel. There's AM Nayak. There is Mr. Deveshwar from ITC. There is Bhaskar Bhatt, who leads Cytel. There is Sunil Mittal, Bharti Airtel. If I think more, I will get more names. Mukesh Ambani is an example there. So I would not worry too much about an MBA. Yeah, of course, it gives you skills, it gives you structured understanding on how to operate businesses, run businesses. And therefore, I would say an MBA is certainly important, but I would not hold that as a victim card saying I don't have an MBA or I don't have a premium institute stamp. Therefore, how do I do this? No, I would not hold that.
But you do come across many startups who would put up in their JD itself saying we want someone from XYZ school and this year pass out, etc. But I'm assuming that's a small percentage of it.
That's a small percentage, and there is no harm in trying to say I'm not from this institute, but let me talk about the impact that I've created. And I think many times that's the reason why I said don't wait for 100% match between your role and the CV. You might not have the stamp of that premium or institute that they might be looking for. But if you talk about the impact and that impact is in line with their understanding of what a premier institute candidate might be delivering, then you still have a chance. And therefore, you would have missed that opportunity if you had not even talked about your impact. Sometimes candidates just take a standard CV and keep sending it to 100 people. That does not work. You have to look at what is the role that you're applying for. Is your CV talking about the impact you've created in the area of that role? And that's what I would encourage people to think about.
Right. I think there are a few other questions, but I think those questions sort of got answered in different form as we respond. The questions that I see are, how do I show my boss or decision makers that I'm ready for the next level? What is most important for me to prepare myself for a larger role? But I think these got responded. Do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think there was a question that came in about military veterans, and I just want, because there are a couple of veterans on this call, and I just wanted to talk about that to say, look,
Sure.
military veterans don't necessarily need to be looking at only loss prevention or safety security kind of roles. Military veterans bring in a lot. They have served the nation, so we have a lot of respect and value for as a country, not just only from an organization perspective. They bring in skills on organization, leading people at scale. They have skills on both tactical maneuvers, tactical exposure, and strategic exposure, and they have the people related skills. Therefore, one of the things I would say, most organizations have a program which is helping military veterans to come in, transition from the uniforms to come to a corporate career. And please do not be under this belief that they can only go into a safety or a security kind of a role. The roles are open. It will depend upon your skill set. But most operational leaders, like in Amazon, for example, we have a lot of operational leaders who are from the military, not just from India, but across the world. The global leader for Air, Amazon Air, is a lady who was a pilot, and she is now a vice president here at Amazon, running Amazon Air. In India, I have a bunch of people who are helicopter pilots, air traffic control experts, missile defense system experts, and who run operations for me in India. So I would just want you to think big and not just be worried about one role that you might be typecast for.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Akhil. As we sum it up, how I'm relaying it for myself is someone who is a non MBA, not from a premier B school, but someone who is very self aware, someone who is owned the career, someone who is built a safety net and a network of mentors, sponsors, allies. Uh, Challenging, reflecting on career, and challenging yourself periodically to see what more can you do, taking bets on yourself, learning from failures, and continuously learning. I think that sort of is the secret sauce of the success of Akhil Saxena. So wonderful. Thanks a ton, Nikhil. Akhil, any parting advice words from you?
No, thank you for the opportunity, Ram, and thank you for the audience for patiently listening in. And the question that you have asked, please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, and I can try and answer some that I might have missed here. But own your career is what I would say, and there are a lot of people in this universe who want to help you. Reach out. Some of them you might hear no's, but don't worry about that. But most people are invested in your growth and your professional journey. So reach out, build that network of people and supporters. That's what I would say.
Great.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
thank you so much, folks. Thanks to all of you for attending, listening, and extracting the best out of Akhil. And like Akhil said, feel free to reach out online, offline, and wish you all the very best with your own career treks. Have a great Sunday.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ram. Have a great weekend. Bye bye.